Thank you, Jonathan, as always. So when we're both in a meeting, it's sometimes confusing. First of all, welcome. Welcome to all of you here. Welcome also to our online audience, of which they are now tuned in. I want to thank the leadership for making this possible here in our digital studio, as well as all of you for showing up. So I'm going to talk for about 20 or 25 minutes. We have a very beautiful and high technology presentation here. We have a really old technology person using this, so there's a possibility for some fits and starts, just warning you. But hopefully the content makes up for that. So what is going on with smart cities? There's been a lot of, I think it was back in 2008 where IBM, perhaps, I don't want to credit people, I'm sure there are other reference points to this, started out with the idea that there was such a thing as a smart city. And then there was a lot of, excitement. And there were some big pilots, and we saw control centers, and, we had a lot of kind of expectations. So what happened? In a nutshell, we kind of got this big dip. We kind of got criticism. We've got, are smart cities an empty hype against the smart city? We had concerns that this was just about actually, hipsters and, people who have, expensive lifestyles having yet another gadget. So maybe not as much as we'd hoped. And it's like Robert Gordon, right? We wanted flying cars. We got 140 characters. Did technology really deliver? And if so, what? Well, that was where that's why we did this research. We were trying to understand essentially where we are now. And where we came out is that we do think we're at an inflection point. We do think this is actually real, and this actually does work in the sense that it gives real benefits to real people, but it doesn't happen by itself. It's not magic, it's management, and cities that do it better get more for it. So I sort of gave you the top line McKinsey right there, but let's now just talk about the numbers and the facts. What we did was essentially three things. We first of all went out and said, what is this smart city? So we looked at 60 applications, and these are everything. So it's, yes, it's mobility, but it's also health, it's crime and safety, it's buildings, it's social platforms, it's e-government, and so forth. So utilities also. And we said, how much does this matter? I mean, if you put it in, what do you get? How much do you get in greenhouse gas emissions? How much do you get in days, disability-adjusted life years for the healthcare? How much do you get in terms of time savings and so forth? So a pretty comprehensive set of indicators. And then we went out and we looked at 50 cities. And so we tried to get a mix, but we also wanted to be global, so not every city. But we said, look, so how are they doing it? Who is deploying what, where, to whom, and are they using it? And so we have that. And then the third thing we did was try to say, so how are they doing it? What are some of the lessons that we can learn from this approach? So that's essentially the report in a nutshell. But before I go there, let's start by saying, what is this thing that we mean by a smart city? So we had to define our terms to begin with because everybody has a different definition. That is a smart city, right? We are in a really smart city. I'll give it away a little bit. New York is one of the smartest cities, but there's a catch to that, and I'll come back to that. A smart city is, for us, we think it's actors plus technologies delivering solutions that lead to a higher quality of life. So it's not just the hardware. Yes, you need some of that, but it's the outcome that matters. So in a nutshell, we would say it's intelligence in the network. There is a network. There's a physical network. You see it around you every day. You walk it, you travel it, you experience it. Imagine the network with intelligence. And what does the intelligence allows you to do? It allows you to make a better decision. That's called a solution. Why is it a better decision? Because it improves your quality of life. That's it. A smarter city gives you the intelligence to make a better decision to improve your quality of life. And as you can imagine, that's not a one-time thing. That is a moving target. Everybody's expectations of their quality of life continually improve, and they have short memories. So it's what have you done for me lately is the challenge of the smart city. We all expect our quality of life to become better. The smart city, importantly, is not just a public sector activity. That's why we want to convene this group. It's everybody. We can't, we often sort of say, if you have a, I hate to say this, if you have a smart plan, well, you've already probably failed, because then you are now separating that smart activity from everything else you are doing, which kind of implies one of those things is not very smart. They need to be together. So the integration of the public, the private, the not-for-profit, the resident, the people who actually live and breathe and experience the city is a characteristic, again, of a smart city. So it is not one person's job or one department's, it's all of our jobs. So the 3 layers of a smart city, as we think about it, that is incidentally not a very smart city. That is Beijing. The first layer is traditional infrastructure, of course. I mean, that's what, again, we can't get around the fact that we have a physical city. So it's not the flying cars or the dematerialized. It's not Star Trek. Sometimes you might wish that. On my way in from JFK this morning, I did. So we have, every city has its own unique footprint, which is one thing we'll come back to when we talk about ranking cities. It's kind of a parlor game, because why would you do that? I mean, every city doesn't ask the question, should I be like Abu Dhabi? Or maybe I should wake up in the morning and I want to be Paris. Well, maybe, but that isn't a practical question. A practical question is, how can I be a better New York? Or how can I be a better Singapore, or wherever? So it's, and we have to work with the tradition, with the physical and the social infrastructure that we've got. So then we get the intelligence. And what's the intelligence? Well, it's the sensors. Importantly, it's the smartphones. Most of this stuff is delivered on your phone right now. So in some countries, that's kind of an issue, because people don't yet have phones. So if we go in India, many cities, you'll see that's an issue. New York, people got phones. So there is an aspect of the ability to deploy some of this infrastructure costs money. You'll find in some of our quantifications, what we did see was that some things are really expensive. We'll note that, for example, congestion-based pricing is a fairly expensive application to roll out, and as a result, not everybody would do that. There are sensors, smartphones, communications networks, and importantly, open data portals, in which many cities, including New York, have a pretty good one. So that capacity, that's sort of the first layer of the smart city. The second then is the applications, which is about turning all of that raw data that you're picking up from those sensors and those cameras and the smartphones into solutions, into actions. Again, it's the decision-making layer. And those are typically verticals, whether it's crime and safety or health or what have you. It's domain expertise that takes a lot of data, turns it into something that is a recommendation or a prescription for action, a behavior that it will hopefully improve your quality of life. So that's the second layer, is the applications. And then the third is the adoption. So are people using it? So that was the third thing we say. In fact, is there awareness? Are people changing their travel patterns? Are they, changing their usage of energy or water, taking charge of their own health? This is all part of the opportunity that a smart city represents. So that's our definition. It's sort of like, you got to have the technology base, but you have to use it and you have to turn it into applications. And finally, you have to have awareness and adoption. So what does it look like when all 3 of these things are doing really great? I think that let's take this one at a time. So time and convenience was one of the measures that I said we were evaluating the impact on. So first of all, your commute. We know this. Anybody who's read, Happy City or any of these other urban tomes will tell you sort of anybody who commutes for more than an hour and a half each day, their lives in general are not so good. Higher rates of alcoholism, higher rates of broken homes, higher rates of divorce. You name it, it's bad. So hurts your physical health. It creates a lot of anxiety, creates poverty traps as well. So this is bad, economically, socially, environmentally. So avoiding that is clearly something that you want to do as a smart city. What can we do? If you've got a reasonable amount of high income and you've got quite a bit of cars and going on, then intelligent traffic lights, smart parking, these become the things you start to focus on. If especially auto-dependent high-income cities, you'll see that being the primary lever. It's the opportunity. If, on the other hand, you are very mass transit focused, and you've got a good transit system, or at least one that covers most of the population, you'll start to see things more like predictive maintenance of the metro, smart payment into digital payments, because that allows you to have better interconnections and better scheduling, so people can have more flexibility and, as a result, better commutes. That's what you see in a mass transit. So it's a dependent city. So there isn't really one size fits all. Is kind of what I'm saying. That this does mean, again, intelligence in the network that's customized to every city's opportunity, and making a better decision whether you are the network provider as the mass transit operator or you are the customer. As the rider or as the driver or as the parking operator or what have you. So innovation is all over the place, and we've seen a lot of this. Of course, everybody here, I'm sure, has taken a shared economy vehicle. So, and I think that's a particularly hot topic because obviously it's not only an economic opportunity, but it has a huge impact on the world of work. And I'm sure that's going to come up in our conversations. I think it's a really important thing that all these benefits do create dislocations in the community. So that I think is important. Beyond that, though, I mean, there's plenty of new stuff that we could go into on the micro transits and so forth. There is no way I'm going to get through this presentation in the next 5 minutes. So I'm going to run another 5 minutes longer, and we're going to see how we're going to go, another 10 minutes longer, and we're going to see how we go. Net of all of that is we can save 15 to 30 minutes off our commute. So I think 15 to 30 minutes is a meaningful amount of anybody's day, particularly when they're awake. Or you can take it in sleep, which would work for me. I think that you see that impact across pretty much every city. So it comes in different ways for the high income versus the low income, and from the mass transit versus the auto dependent. But 15 to 30 minutes is a reasonable opportunity. One other one, public safety. Like it or not, a lot of people worry about crime and sort of what the impacts that this can have on crime. We can predict better, we can accelerate response times, and we can help solve the crimes. What does that mean? Real-time crime mapping reduces fatalities 8 to 10%, saves 300 lives per year, faster response, reduced crime incidents. These are real numbers, but I think the important caveat here, of course, is that this is all real, but it's how you use it. And we can use it in a way which discriminates, and which infringes on civil liberties, which criminalizes certain people and sort of areas. We've done this before, so we don't want to do it again. So this is a very important recognition that this thing has power, but it has power for good. It has potentially power for bad, and we need to understand and have the debate about how we use the tool. As I said, smart technologies must be deployed in a way that protects civil liberties and avoids criminalization. Preventing incidents, that's one I think we can all agree on. We've seen this technology reduce emergency response times by 20 to 35%. Improving first responder time by 10 to 15 minutes makes a huge difference. The stroke victim, that's a matter of minutes. It's either you show up or you don't. There's more. In the interest of time, I mean, health is an interesting one because here what we can do is we have so much data that we can now aggregate it and we can come up with solutions at scale. The one that we've found a lot of take-up on is the digital wellness orientation, is sort of helping people take more accountability for their own health. And sort of having better information allows them to take their meds on time, get responses from healthcare providers faster and more directly, and have public health interventions. And again, Lagos is different from Rio than is different from New York. You have different problems, different health solutions. Overall, reducing the health burden by 8 to 15% in low-income cities and in high-income cities. So here are a few examples. Lifestyle diseases, that's what we might worry about in high-income cities, Hong Kong or Shenzhen or New York. Remote patient monitoring is a solution, helps you prevent, treat, monitor chronic conditions, diabetes, or whatever is ailing you, and there's an opportunity there. That's a high-income situation. If you're going to a low-income city, the problems are more like preventable causes, and so you have an infectious disease, a surveillance system, telemedicine that goes, it can be a part of that, sort of being able to step in and see when there's actually an infectious problem in the neighborhood, and then applying the data and the analytics to help the responders, the institutions in this case, do a better job of managing the infection. That's something that we see a lot now in Brazil, for example, in Zika. So seamless healthcare is what I just referred to. So let me go quickly to where do the cities then stand today. As I said, there's a ranking, but we're not going to tell you who's number one. I will tell you that New York is a pretty smart city. But what I have to say is this: nobody is at 100%. So on a 1 to 10 scale, the best we're getting is a C. It's like a 70. That's kind of what we've got here. That nowhere have we seen a city achieve the full range of the applications and of the best hardware and have all the citizen adoption. I think that's natural because on the one hand, technology is moving really fast, so we can't, it's just a race to keep up. But also, there are real challenges. This is management. It doesn't happen by itself. And so we need to recognize that every city has its own learning curve. Here's some examples of what cities are or aren't doing. Mobility tends to be the things that people do first. So that's why we're going to talk a lot about mobility today. Mobility comes first. We are seeing quite a bit on the economic development and the community, the social networks and platform. That tends to get deployed very quickly. Healthcare, not so much, and utilities perhaps slowest of all. Interesting commentary perhaps on what it actually takes to build out that customer, that citizen-resident relationship, and what it also takes to change the regulatory construct there. One point to mention. When we looked at the awareness, Asian cities were like way off the charts. And this was kind of interesting for us because we said, why is that? We would posit it's something about digital natives and sort of having a younger profile and people who are more perhaps grown up with a smartphone and they've never seen it, never experienced anything else. But it's also growth. These are the cities that are growing. These are the cities that are having to come up with new ways of treating municipal infrastructure, and they're just incorporating this from day one. There isn't any legacy. So something to think about as we try to address growth and growth opportunities as well. Finally, moving smart cities forward. So do we think this is all about hype? I mean, we hope not. We think that these are real numbers that can be introduced, and we haven't, for example, even gone to things like autonomous vehicles. That's not part of this, because that area we think is actually a whole another kind of opportunities, and we should treat it as its own thing. But even with what we've got right now, we see meaningful differences in people's lives. More than a flip of a switch, right? This is something that's going to take a bit more time. Impact is not automatic. We've been saying this, that we can't separate the smart plan from the infrastructure plan. We need a smart infrastructure plan. It has to be together. And so this is something that will take a bit of time. But again, the opportunity is there. And how will it be realized? The public-private partnerships, civic technology talent, these are the changes that we actually start to see. In a lot of cities, as we look through it, over half of the applications are going to be funded probably by the private sector. So this opens up an entirely new conversation about how do we deploy municipal infrastructure and who is actually responsible, given that the premise of this is to create choice and opportunity for what is a public good. So the conversation of the public-private relationship is critical for us to ensure that we maintain the public objectives of a safe, harmonious, fair, inclusive city while capturing the opportunities of choice and quality that a smart technology allows us to do. So will this also maybe only be about the hipsters? We don't think so. We think that this is a smart city is, again, an inclusive city. It's a city for all. From grandma to the babies. I mean, everybody needs to be part of this city, but it is a choice. And if we choose to go for fee-for-service approaches that disenfranchise the vast majority of the population, well, we won't get that. We will not get a smart city. We will get a divided one. And so this is a conversation that, again, all of us need to have. I would close with saying this is a smart city. See, this is it. It's all of us. We have this opportunity. We can do this together. And I look forward to the conversation. Do I get to take one or two questions? Okay, I'm allowed to take a few questions now. So we'd love to have any quick reactions if people have. Otherwise, we will go on. So. Okay. Joshua. Yeah.
Don't know if you don't mind. The point you just made about fairness and equity, is that something that you're able to measure in terms of who's the smartest city with respect to the equal distribution of those benefits?
I think, so the question is, can we get people to measure, can we measure equity? Can we measure access? And how does that show up in our rankings? And I think we certainly can measure usage and adoption. And I think we can also measure that geographically. We can see which neighborhoods are using which applications. We can tie that back to patterns of usage, times of day. We can potentially, given consent, understand, do samplings of saying more things about the person who is using it, sort of their, again, income, age, whatever. But I personally think that geospatial data is a great way of understanding equity. It's like patterns cluster. So using the information to understand the pattern of behaviors across cities allows us to do a lot in understanding why things are happening the way they are. So short answer is yes, I think we can. I'd love to do that. I'd love to do that for many cities. So yeah, it's a good question. Yes, Tim.
Hey, Jonathan, you talked about Asia being the most advanced as far as smart cities. Can you just rank order the other continents as well, just kind of put it in perspective?
I wouldn't say eight. It's like, don't rank it. No, as I said, first of all, I think we would recognize that there is, first of all, there's great regional disparity. And in every region, in Asia, plenty of cities that are not very forward-looking. And so, so I wouldn't say that continents necessarily are a great way of analyzing this. But I do think that there are some similarities. There are some patterns in regions. They have to do with, we think, with quality of existing infrastructure. And so where quality of existing infrastructure is very high, Tokyo, then people are less interested in doing a new thing because they may feel like they're getting what they want right now. Places where there's a growth challenge or there's clearly a trajectory that's improving every year, people are quick to adopt. Age, as I said, might be another pattern. So with European cities, maybe a bit older, maybe not quite, and very high levels of service already. So, but I would not generalize at the regional level. I really think it comes down to the city and the leadership and the management of the city, and that's what's the differentiator. Yep.
So building off of that, what's the same or what's different in slums and low-income communities within the cities that you've looked at?
So the question is, what's the same or different in slums and low-income communities? So that's a great question. It builds on Joshua sort of saying, how can we measure inclusivity of this technology? Is this technology really being used? It's a much broader question, of course, around how infrastructure and public services are provided. That base infrastructure is clearly, you can't avoid that part of the answer. So like if you're starting with a really bad situation, the technology is not going to magically make it better. We do have to make some investments. So I'll just stop right there because I think that's the biggest differentiating factor is the base infrastructure. Maybe one more question. So, yes, over there.
Have you thought, or has McKinsey done any research into the optimal public-private partnership model to catalyze smart city innovation? The question is, so do we have a model that we suggest for public-private partnerships and how to implement them? And I will have to say no. I mean, I think that we've certainly done a lot of thought, but we don't think, again, there's a model. I think this now creates the choice. And public-private partnerships range all the way from the contract done on a project basis that we might renew or not, to outsourcing the whole thing and selling it off to somebody who gets a monopoly on it. I mean, and so there's this vast spectrum of ways you can do it. And I would have to say that the most important thing is to know why you're doing it, as it is a public-private partnership. And so in the absence of a clear rationale and a set of expectations from the public sector, what you get is the private sector. And the private sector does have a motivation, which is not the public's motivation. That's why it's called the private sector. So we have to be clear about why we are encouraging the provision of some aspect of this service by the private sector, presumably for innovation and efficiency or other reasons. But we also have to be equally clear about what it is that we do not want to lose in the form of equity or service standards or provision. And this goes back to a very long body of utility regulation that's quite global. So I mean, we would think that's a journey, and there isn't one size fits all. I'm conscious of time. It's a busy day, and people are in full flux here. So I'd like to now turn it back to Rebecca and Joshua to come up, and we're going to go forward with the conversation on New York. So, thanks. Rebecca Blumenstein from Wall Street Journal and Joshua Breitbart.
Cities everywhere are under stress, and in many of them, growth has led to growing pains, including traffic, pollution, and crime, to name just a few. But cities are also the world's best laboratories for solutions. They're applying data and technology to make better decisions and do more with less. Digital systems can make infrastructure systems more efficient behind the scenes, but making a city truly smart means more than installing sensors and software. It's about using technology and data to deliver a better quality of life. The McKinsey Global Institute looked at dozens of current smart applications to size up what they can do in cities with different characteristics and starting points. The results were striking. We found that a city of 5 million people could save 30 to 300 lives per year. Cities could shave 15 to 30 minutes off the daily commute. They could reduce crime incidents by 30 to 40%. And there's more. Cities could improve health, lower carbon emissions, and speed up emergency response times. They can make healthcare and local government more efficient and accessible. Digital apps and platforms can even help people feel more connected to their community. Municipal governments can't produce results like these on their own. Companies and residents play active roles. Instant information helps everyone make better decisions. And when millions of those decisions add up, the city's overall performance improves. Even the smartest cities on the planet still have a long way to go. But there's a wave of innovation worldwide. As cities get smarter, they're becoming more livable and more responsive to the people who call them home.